Hi, welcome to another episode of MID Global. I'm your host, Leanne Hackman-Carty. If you look at the news over the past couple of years, you'll notice that there's been a lot of hurricane activity in the Caribbean, whether it's been the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, or other areas within the Caribbean. It's been hit hard. One of the lights that is starting to emerge out of this whole area is a group called the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. Today, I'm talking to Racquel Moses, its CEO, about some of the exciting work that they're doing in the region to help it become more disaster resilient in the future. So stay tuned. Hey, Racquel, thanks for being with me today.
Hi, Leanne. Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe before we get started, if you could just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, your background.
Sure. My name is Racquel Moses. I'm currently the CEO of the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. I've had that role for about a year. Prior to that, I was the country manager for Microsoft Trinidad and Tobago and the regional director for public sector for Microsoft. And prior to that, I had roles including JP Morgan Chase, Fujitsu, Cable and Wireless. I was the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Investment Promotion Agency. So those are the kinds of things that I've done.
That's great. Well, my background's actually economic development, so I think some of the stuff that you and I do or have done, or even people we know, are probably similar. Just curious, I know that the Climate Accelerator, it's somewhat new, but can you just give me a little bit of history about what it is, how it was formed, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So we were conceptualized in 2017 when three prime ministers, the Prime Minister of Grenada, St. Lucia, and Dominica, got together with Sir Richard Branson and decided that something needed to be done. We had just experienced Hurricanes Maria and Irma that devastated several parts of countries across the region, and they decided something needed to be done because climate action in the region was not moving at pace or fast enough. So they decided what needed to be done was the creation of a climate smart zone, and that the region would be the location for climate smart action, and that we would work together to be able to implement our climate goals. Fast forward to 2018 when the business plan was developed and the whole concept came to fruition. The end of 2018 was when we launched, and I came on board in January of 2019. So we are within the first year of our sort of execution. And what we do is we work with regional governments to be able to, one, create economies of scale, two, to generate financing and funding for projects to be able to get them to move forward, three, to engage the private sector to ensure that the private sector is involved in the programs that are taking place, and that we move as quickly as possible, as inclusively as possible towards climate action. We focus on five main areas. It's resilient cities and smart cities and resilient infrastructure, energy efficiency and renewable energy, oceans and agriculture, electric vehicles, and finally, everything falls under the umbrella of innovative finance. So anything that we do needs to be something that is innovative in how we execute it.
Right. And so how many partners do you have? I think is it 28 governments, or what's the number?
We have 26 partner governments. Now we have 23 of those are execution countries where we anticipate having projects on the ground, and 3 of those are donor countries or supporting countries where we ask them for technical capacity or financial support in the execution of our projects. So you'll hear about, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
You'll hear about countries like Mexico being a partner, but certainly we don't anticipate any execution on the ground in Mexico.
Right. As far as, I know that partly this would have been, you mentioned it earlier, how it was started with the hurricanes in 2017. Have you seen a lot of activity since then on this kind of portfolio? I know you just started in 2019, but since that time, a couple of years later, has there been significant movement on any of these fronts? And can you speak about some of the initiatives you guys have undertaken?
Sure. So I can tell you about the region in general, and then I can tell you about the work that we've done. So in terms of the region in general, when we look at the landscape of what countries have committed to doing and what they've actually achieved, or at least what they have undertaken to start, we're seeing about 55% of the countries making positive moves towards execution. So it's either RFPs have been issued, projects have been scoped, ground has been broken, projects have started, projects have been completed, which is really encouraging. Now, that means that there are 45% of the projects slash countries where we're not seeing enough action. And there are countries that are talking a lot of great things, but we're not necessarily seeing the work. And there are other countries who are fairly quiet, where you're seeing a lot of work. We look at things also like the Castalia Renewable Energy Index, where countries have declared their installed capacity and their planned capacity. It also looks at the enabling environment. And we see that as being really indicative of the progress that countries are making and how they're executing on those objectives. For us, we have 61 projects in our pipeline. And of those 61 projects, a lot of them are in the very, very early stages. We tend to pick projects where there is a challenge, but it's not an insurmountable challenge. So the government's on board. It's one of their initiatives. They want the private sector on board. There is political will. There may be some funding or something else, some technical capacity that's required to be able to unlock it. And all of our projects typically take a long time. The first project that we've delivered, we delivered earlier this year. It's a sustainable water project we did with a partner called Zero Mass Water. We implemented this sustainable and independent water supply at a children's ward in a hospital at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica. And so now if there's a disaster and that hospital is hit, they don't have to worry about accessing the municipal water supply. They produce their own water out of air as a result of this solution. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about. And the philanthropy of our partners as well allows us to be able to do things like that.
Yeah.
If I think about the challenges that we see, we're seeing a lot of mitigation projects because those have cash flows. We're not seeing a lot of adaptation projects. But what we know is from the research is that every dollar you spend on adaptation, you're saving, you're avoiding spending $4 post-disaster. And we do need to think about how do we leverage the monies that will be spent to be able to spend that up front on adaptation. We also look at things like Bahamas, that's classified as a high-income country, and they couldn't get the funding that they needed for the adaptation. And now money's flowing in to help them with the rebuilding, but that's the wrong time to spend the money. And they recognize that quite early. And I hats off to Bahamas for always knowing what needed to be done. But a lot of the big lending institutions need to now understand, listen, there is a risk factor that we face in the region that needs to be thought through when we think about classifying countries as high income or low income for accessing concessional finance.
Yeah, I know it's a big discussion in a lot of the communities where I work too. It's the piece where your insurance lets you basically build back to where you were. And when you really look at that, you go, well, now how much sense does it make to build back exactly with the same risk I just had? It doesn't make much sense. We should be building back better. But you're right. I mean, those dollars for that type of thing they're not there yet. I just actually was speaking with a woman with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy this week. They just released their report, and she was talking about how, when you look at the overall pocket of money that's given to philanthropy or disasters, it goes to relief. Very little to the mitigation, to the preparedness, to the resiliency piece. And so you just think, okay, so we've got to start thinking differently in how we fund projects and how we actually rebuild. And so as far as what you've seen there, what would you say the biggest opportunities for the Caribbean would be? Does anything stand out?
And when you say opportunities, give me a sense of what you mean.
Well, I think maybe it's on the resilience side. So is there, maybe it's the smart community piece, maybe it's through, well, I mean, obviously it's innovation, but is there, say, a technology with smart sensors or other types of things that might make sense? Or is it looking at things like food security in the region? You having like you talked, independent water systems where if all else fails, because part of the risk is being an island in itself, right? The access to goods and services is cut off. So are there things that maybe, that you're looking at thinking, yeah, these are things that would be great for the region. They're not totally funded yet, but if they were, they could make a very significant difference.
That's an excellent question. I think the biggest opportunity that we have in the region is energy efficiency. We're spending so much on looking at renewable energy, which absolutely is the right thing to do, but we are planning capacity for excess use. And so if we looked at energy efficiency first, not only does that free up cash flow, but it also allows us to build or plan for renewables to the capacity that we actually need and not excess capacity. So I see that as sort of entry level, bargain basement. First thing that we should address is energy efficiency.
Good. Well, is there anything else that maybe I didn't ask and you'd like to highlight some of the things you're doing, or?
Well, I think what we want is just to get people involved. First, hold your countries accountable. A lot of countries are releasing plans. When you look at like the Castalia Index and some other measures, and certainly at the Accelerator, and we'd love for you to reach out to us and find out how countries are doing. But when you look at how the things that they're saying, we want to see more countries that are in the doing column and not in the saying column. We want Caribbean people to hold their governments accountable. And we want Caribbean people, both at home and abroad, to invest in resilience and invest in new projects and support the projects that are taking place on the ground, to be a part of this movement to create the change that we need to see. Lives do not need to be lost after every disaster season, and it's unnecessary, and it's unfortunate, and it's heartbreaking. And so we definitely need to take this and ensure that we learn from every experience. And then finally, what I'd say is I see this as an opportunity for us. We really have the ability to build regional capacity that we can then have as a part of our economic resilience to export the skills and the intellectual property that we develop around climate resilience. And so we need to really take a big picture approach to this and realize that this is step one in a future leadership role that we could have if we look at it in that way.
That's great. Well, I'm going to, in the bottom of the video, I'll put the link to your organization so people can get in touch. They can find out what you're doing on an ongoing basis. I know if you've got 60 projects on the back burner, it's a lot of projects. You're going to be very busy, and hopefully the monies will come and the partners will come, and you can make a big difference because obviously it's an area that needs some attention, and it's going to take all of us to make a difference there. So thank you, Raquel, for the work that you're doing every day.
Well, thank you. Thank you for always drawing attention to this and all of the work that you've done. I went through all of the videos and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because you are relentless in your pursuit of ensuring that we don't lose focus. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people like you continuing to just, hammer this home that we need to get it. This is how we look at this disaster preparedness and ensure that we're ready.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that compliment, and it's ditto. I feel the same way. So thanks again, Raquel, and hopefully stay in touch.
Thank you. All right.